So what I want to talk about is CCM. We're redefining a little bit based on what we've seen both in the enterprise space and what we're also seeing from technology and service providers, but really talking about how it interacts and is part of the overall customer experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call the customer experience spectrum, talk about redefining CCM. I'm going to show just a typical journey that we're seeing in enterprises, and then talk a little bit about what that looks like, and then we'll have some Q&A. As we mentioned, I was born in Long Island, grew up in New York State, live in New Jersey. I talk a little fast, I move a little fast, throw up the hand, the stop sign, ask me questions anytime you want. Otherwise, I'll just keep going because I enjoy. Also, if I look stressed, I have 4 daughters. This is the permanent look. You know, when they're 26, 24, 18, and 14, one married, one just decided to take 10 days off from school and go to Denmark and England and Reykjavik. Because for those of you who don't know, if you book your flight through Iceland, it's like $300 to get to Europe, and your layover is 12 hours because they want you to spend money in Iceland. So a little travel tip if you want to. Yeah, it's a long 12 hours, but yeah. So anyway, so this is the normal look. So let's talk a little bit about customer experience and kind of a basic formal definition, but it's kind of everything surrounding that customer in terms of interactions, whether it's documents, social media, and over time, it's how you perform versus what the customer's expectations are, right? So let's take it a little bit deeper and talk about, so in this spectrum, obviously in the center you have the customer, and then the experience is everything that touches them around them from the different enterprises. Some very interesting statistics. 4 years ago, 36% of companies thought the customer experience was important. Fast forward, 89% of companies and enterprises feel that customer experience is key. To the point when Forrester talked to 250 leading organizations, customer experience was on top of strategic initiatives, above new product development, above things that and employee satisfaction. This was critical strategic investments that are making on the corporate side. So when we look at it, let's talk about where. And when I say CCM, I'm not talking about software. I'm talking about the overall process of communications, getting to the customer, and that's what drives that customer experience. So I'm referring to it as a delivery platform, not strictly software. It's kind of everything that goes in to what CCM or that customer communications management looks like. As you notice let's say in the enterprises, all of the legacy systems, whether it's ERP, CRM, ECM, BPM, and any line of business system, is what feeds the CCM platform, what then delivers to the client. So one of the important notes I want to talk about is line of business systems. You're talking admin systems been in place for 20 and 30 years that manage claims, that manage different processes. They were not, nor were they ever thought of to be designed to drive the customer experience. They were meant to drive and push transactions and workflow through an organization. But those systems are now feeding this CCM platform, which is driving the communications. Now there's one other element here that enterprises will tell you they think they can kind of control, and that is this external influencers that's driving customer experience, i.e. social media. You can find statistic after statistic that 90% of consumers don't buy anything without going out and looking on the internet for, let's go talk to Mr. Google. And it's not just retail products, it's everything. It's, I'll be honest, my wife and I own a midwifery practice. She's a midwife. Every patient comes in and said, well, I think I have this, this, and this. My baby's not moving. Well, who'd you talk to? Well, Dr. Google. I went online and said, they come in and I think I have triplets. No, you have one. So, and so it is so critical, and that is so difficult to manage, but you obviously have to be aware of it. Any thoughts, comments, disagree?
actually, even on the enterprise side, the sales cycle, because I know there's lots of salespeople in here, is not what it used to be, because you now engage with customers when they're already halfway through their buying decision.
Mm-hmm.
Not at the front end like it used to be, right? So that's a whole new world that you have to deal with. Basically, what you just said with the midwife is the same thing with the enterprise. They
Absolutely.
already know what they think you do and how you do it.
It also has caused a lot of confusion, and I'll say specifically even within CCM, because let's face it, you can go out on the internet and find a website that has a quote-unquote solution. It could literally be 3 people that looks like 3,000 people, and people can essentially classify themselves. Oh, I'm a CCM software provider. Well, they may have a portion, they may have a tool, they may have an element of that, but is it truly a complete platform or what they say it is? And it's hard to vet that on the internet. And that's one of the things that we do at Madison is like, okay, we spend a lot of time saying, do you have these features? No, well then how do you really say that you have what you have? And that's where, and I think Randy has talked about this, smart consumer. It gets very difficult when you're trying to battle the reality of what something is versus what the internet says it is. So that's something that enterprise, everybody's really dealing with, is what is true and what is just perception. So if you go look on, let's say, is Wikipedia the authority of everything? This definition is just pulled off Wikipedia, which obviously people can edit, but it says that CCM is the creation, delivery, storage, and retrieval of outbound communications, including marketing, new product introductions, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm going to talk about today is I think that is too narrow, and it's not truly what CCM is all about. You got to take outbound out of the word. That's not the only communication that goes on between organizations. There's a whole nother part of the conversation that's going on that traditionally the CCM platforms have not looked at. We're seeing enterprises demanding more and we're seeing technology providers trying to broaden and play in this market. So what does this really mean to us? So this goes back to my point that CCM is not strictly just you or the enterprise talking to the client, but there's a lot of talking back to the client. So you've got your outbound communications, but there's a lot of inbound communications that the customer is sending back into the organizations. And then where do all these communications get stored? They're stored somewhere in some kind of archive that we used to call records, dead records, right? Or records management. This was stuff that you put in the box and it was never going to come out of a box or come out of a database until you had an issue, until you had an audit, until you had something like that. Well, I would tell you, you're really preserving those communications so that when further down the line, when you have an experience with a client, you want to go back and see what was said previously, what was talked about. So that is an important part of CCM. And then preference management is a huge topic. You know, it was originally conceived as simple as, hey, the data's coming through, and I'm going to pick on Paul. Does Paul want a paper copy or does he want a digital copy of his statement, of his outbound documents? Not that simple. Because now you got disclosures, you got a whole realm of communications, but the consumer's sitting there saying, hey, I told you I wanted everything digital, why am I still getting paper? Well, go look at the typical enterprise. 5 lines of business, 5 preference management systems, one's not talking to the other. Guess what? This is driving a customer experience that is not appreciated. When I tell you I don't want paper, I don't want stuff to get in the mail. Or I want the ability to say, you know what? I want my statements paper, but I want my disclosures digital, because guess what? I'm not reading those, whatever it is. This whole concept of preference management drives the customer experience. So when I define CCM, as I mentioned, I'm not talking about software, all that's part of it. It's really that whole management of that customer experience. Anybody disagree? Go ahead.
Just to add to it, we had an Xplor event a few weeks ago, and I heard this term that I hadn't really thought about, somebody capturing from a statistical perspective. And they said that there are 30% of people that are double dipping. So they're going for the paper and the electronic, so that's part of their experience. So by turning one off or making them commit with a binary, you're on or off on that, can bother people just as equally. So trying to figure out the mix of that is important.
Simple experience, one of my associates, and I won't use names, but got her renewal for her auto club. She is 40-ish, single, been a member for 15 years. Gets the renewal, hey, here's your renewal, and by the way, you can get 10% off if you sign up your teenage driver. And she's like, really? This is still what they don't know. And in 15 years, they haven't figured it. And everybody says, oh, we've all accomplished that. It hasn't all been accomplished. But right there's that customer experience, and there's a whole lot of reasons and excuses for it. But it's one of those things saying, hey, come on, really, you got to know who I am. So we feel that CCM is bi-directional, not just outbound, but also, you talk to the customer, are you listening when they talk back to you? Okay, I can go back one. So the typical customer journey, and this across different industry enterprises, that data's been pulled in, composition print, and we've sent outbound communications to a client. In this example, we use a welcome kit, and they could also be sending their statements. But typically in a welcome kit or an application, there may be some kind of forms that have to be completed. Those documents are then submitted back to the client. Now, typically CCM is looked at, how do we get those documents out? How do we get, whether it's digital, paper? But the element that's not being looked at is, okay, now the customer has completed those documents, or digitally or paper, and submitted it back into the inbound capture center, either which is in-house or outsourced, and bring that document in. I don't have the exact percentage because it varies from company to company. A good percentage of those forms that come in are not completed are not to completion. So now a communication has to go back to them saying, okay, let's say it's a beneficiary form. You didn't check a box, you didn't tick a box. We need, if there has been a passing, we need an original copy of the death certificate, whatever it is, wasn't submitted, so they send that back out. How many companies do you think that external correspondence actually goes back into the outbound providing process? Very little of it. Unstructured customer correspondence is coming now from customer service or internal departments going back out to the client. And do you think that's 100% hit? No, another document comes in. This cycle can go on 3, 4, 5 different conversations till it's brought to completion. So you've got the outbound communication, now you have this whole other process going in here. And there's one other element that drives people from compliance crazy, is what's going on in terms of archive. Typically, on the outbound side, there's a very structured archive of anything that goes out that's put into various databases. It's got versioning control. It has a history, how it applies to the recommended policy. But I tell you, on the inbound side, the majority of these communications end up in the case management folder on the work desk for that particular claim process or whatever it is. And in a lot of companies, it's a folder on a network drive. And having spent quite a few years in the records management side, there's a general principle for a company that says, you are better off not having a records policy than having one and not following it. And that's what the judges have said when it's gone to court. Hold it. Where are all your documents? Well, we don't have any of them. Well, where's your records policy? Well, we don't have one. Versus the guy who says, why do you have this, the judge says, why do you have this document that it should have been destroyed 3 years ago according to your own records policy? You are out of compliance with your own policy. There's a landmark case that went on in California that basically sent shockwaves through the records industry, that everybody said, okay, I better fix my policies and follow my policies. So why is that a problem? Is there any kind of formal process on a network folder to go off and delete documents that should no longer be there, and to make sure, okay, oh, I dragged Paul's folder into Warren's folder. Now I've got different clients' information in the same place. This is a very scary part of the process. So what could or should the journey look like? If you actually look at the different elements, your outbound communications, one direction, but now we're talking bi-directional. You're bringing them back into the organization And the processes for outbound, inbound, and archive, they do mesh together very well. There's no reason why that CCM platform can't look at the broader picture. So, little simplistic, but let's take it to the next level. When you look at the typical CCM outbound platform, and this could be on-premise, it could be a cloud version, it could be a hosted managed service process, but there's some basic elements from an outbound side. Obviously, you're bringing data in for core systems, you're going into content repository to drag that out, doing your full composition engine, you're looking at profile delivery, post-composition, to your multi-channels, archive, and you've got dashboards. You know, a nice broad picture of what a CCM platform looks like from the outbound perspective. How different is it if you add the inbound into it? Whoops. Okay, before I go to that, for those of you who aren't familiar with kind of what's going on in the inbound world, what we call intelligent capture is what's moving through most inbound centers. The basic concept is get the documents mailed in, whether they're digital, get them into my system, and from there, you know, if it's a paper document, I'm going to OCR it and convert it to readable text, and then I'm going to classify the type of document. There's 3 ways today that those documents are classified. 80 to 90% of them is once they're captured, there's people sitting behind a terminal and they're doing what we call doc ID. This is a beneficiary notice. This is a change of address. And then they then put those in the appropriate workflow systems within an organization to be worked on. That's probably 80% of how it gets done today. What's the second, what do you think the other 2 are of how you identify a document back into the mailroom? Ideally, if this document was generated by my outbound provider, what should be on that document? There should be a barcode. That barcode can be read and classify that document. One of the big topics I always talk about in inbound mailroom, you got to take the fingers and toes out of it. If you've been in an inbound mailroom, there's people opening envelopes, they're flattening, they're getting rid of the rabbit-eared edges, pulling staples, taping things down, and doing a tremendous amount of sorting so that they don't have to do it on DocuID. Oh, these are beneficiary notices. These are welcome, whatever it is. They're trying to do all that manually. Then they ingest it and try to smooth along this process. In intelligent capture, you just want to get the envelopes open and scan them. Get them into the system and let the system OCR, let the system classify it. So instead of having people behind a terminal, instead, in addition to, the first step is let's read the barcode. Because that, we know exactly, not only do we know what type of document it is, we most likely know who's returning it. If outbound, we can embed that into the barcode. Where the intelligence software comes in now, the new software in this industry is it actually can learn what the document is. I've seen this document before. Oh, this is a beneficiary from General Motors and it's going to an organization. Now I know exactly where the data should be in that document, which goes to the extraction process. Typically in the world today is once a group of people have classified the document, you're now going to completion, where somebody's keying what they see. Well, these are beneficiary documents. I have some business rules. I visually look for those on the document and I key those in and I send them into the system. In the new world, if the system has said this is a beneficiary, it now goes and extracts the data automatically because it knows where the data should be on the form, which is kind of a geolocation, which has its limitations. But now the intelligence is there to say, I need to find 5 pieces of data off this form. First one, let's say, it needs to be a social security number. Because I've OCR'd everything, it'll scan the document, find anywhere where I can see SSN number and look right to the right of it and see if that looks like a social security number and grab it and pull it in. And then, so now I've taken more fingers and toes out of the business. I'm now to the validation stage. And here's where it's really getting very unique and new, and we'll talk about this some other time, is typically now this has to be stored in the database and recalled. There are now, the capture companies are building software bots that go out into the databases and find where data is and should be, versus humans right now on a terminal are looking for, through admin systems, to find data, where to place data, and where to get data. The software technology is out there to go look for it and point them to the right direction. So this is a much more automated process. So the time it gets to workflow, to the line of business, so much of the data has been cleaned up. Now they're adjudicating or finalizing something they're not doing. Right now you have adjudicators who are highly trained, fairly expensive, who are down here doing this stuff. That's not where you want them. You want them actually providing value and doing adjudication. So there's my 101 on inbound capture, intelligence capture. Absolutely, Kathy.
How strong is this new world? Because we're right here, right now, on our P2E business, we're looking at software, determining what we're going to do, and what the new scanners can bring to the table. I mean, the new world could be defined, are we in the beginning of it? Is it truly strong enough to classify the types of documents? Because probably 10% of my inbound has 2D barcodes, because the rest of it comes from someone else that's printed it. I've got hundreds and hundreds of people sitting behind computer screens doing this classification. So
some of the technology is, like when I'm talking about the bots, that's just, that's relatively recent. I will tell you, there's some software out right now. Here's what they do. It's all about, if I can just, there's a perception by a lot of dinosaurs, myself in the capture business, say, you know what, you can OCR it, and you're going to get maybe 60%. Fixing the other 40% actually takes me more time than you just let me key the whole thing from the start. That is perception that's been going on for 5 years. That is starting to disappear a little bit. One of the first solutions I saw to get rid of that, so it's been in place about 4 or 5 years, is bring the document, OCR the document, and it'll try to fill out as much as it can. And typically it kicks it out, and then you have to repair the balance. There's technology now that the system will say, just tell me what this field is. And you key that field in, and it'll go back in and do 2 or 3 more passes and try to complete the rest of the document. So it doesn't fully auto-classify it, but what it does, it reduces your number of repairs and goes through. So for example, if all it really needs, if the account number is not legible, it doesn't get a hit on the account number, it'll present the operators that just key the account number. Don't key anything else in, just key the account number. Then I'm going to go back and reprocess it. And if I can populate 8 of the 15 fields left there, I've just seen an awful lot of fingers and toes in putting that through. So it is fresh, but it's been in research, and now it's coming out as a process. So even if it just, if you get 5, 10, 15% improvement, you're way ahead of the game. Okay, so so now I want to take a look at, we talked about what a typical outbound CCM platform looked like, talking a little bit about what intelligent capture does there. Think about now, if you incorporate this to your overall CCM platform, all you're really doing is you're adding that capture engine in here, you're integrating with the pieces you already have, but now you have bidirectional. So not only, typically you're just getting the raw data in to do the composition, now you can actually capture data and put it back through the same pipe into the same systems you're integrating with. And then you're communicating out, but you use the same process to bring communications back in. So I sent out an application, it's been completed, it can go back into this same process to generate a final application to trigger the next document, and you've eliminated all this redundancy of multiple archive systems. Because I will tell you, if you've not gone to your customer service center recently of an enterprise, a tremendous amount of time is get off the phone, go look at a network drive, I pull the template that I have for a letter, I complete it, and I mail it out. When we walk compliance folks through customer set, they cringe, because it's like there's 60 people who are now authoring letters on behalf of the company, and none of them with the training or the clearance of what they should be doing. So there's that benefit on that side, but think about from an IT standpoint. I already have connections to all these systems. Now I'm depositing data instead of extracting data. We've already got a channel built to, everything that goes digitally or paper should be going through the same channel within enterprise, not just statements. It should be all those communications, because there's people in customer service printing a letter on a laser printer, folding it, putting it in the envelope, metering it, not at full rate, and mailing it out. It's thousands of letters a day, trust me, and they have SLAs that they have to hit, tremendous amount of productivity opportunity, and when you look at it from this perspective. Is this clear? Is this good? Okay. So kind of to summarize, CCM is a bidirectional and it provides information through all delivery channels. It unifies inbound and outbound customer communications. Now you're getting that 360-degree view. So now, when you're the customer in that customer experience, you get great communications from your statements and your traditional outbound transactions now. But have you ever seen the letters that come from customer service? It's kind of a checklist. There's no color. We'll talk later about how you fix bad documents. You know, that immediately can negate that great customer experience. Also an opportunity to get rid of all those operational redundancies and allow for shared resources. If you look at an enterprise today, their inbound and their outbound resources are completely separate, probably not taking advantage of synergies and technology, and it's a challenge to get that through. Real opportunity for shared resources, but clearly it can positively impact the customer experience. And enterprise clients are telling us this, that what the customer experience is I want to talk to the customer, I need to listen to what they tell me, I need to act on it, and then I need to remember it. So just think about that as outbound, inbound, archive, and follow-up response. I mean, that's what it's all about. And we're in the middle of all that, and we've built these delivery channels. It's not a stretch to make this, improve this process. Yes?
I think, too, that it substantially improves your compliance. I mean, that could cost you more than a lot of things. Things go wrong.
Yep.
Don't want them going on there.
And it gives you, the piece I didn't talk about too much is, think about it now, you have an integrated dashboard. You know all your outbound communications, you know your inbound communications. We didn't even talk about, you know, when you truly draw this into the inbound. So you've sent the outbound communication, it's got a BRE in it. We know we can put all the technology in there, but how many companies are actually telling their customer service that mail is coming back to them? And you could know, you have the technologies there, you could reporting that onto the dashboard. So now you get into all these other fundamentals of saying, okay, we can better manage our resources on the customer service because we know what mail's in. If X percent that goes out, we know a certain percent's going to go in, you can anticipate it, you can track it. And now the other, and I didn't talk about it, but real life story. So I you send out the communication, comes into customer service, they're sending out a letter. At the same time, because the person has a question on it, at the same time we could be kicking off a whole new transaction for another trigger that contradicts what's going out from the customer service center. And their flag's like, don't you know who I am? You know, and I talked to another person, where's the document I sent in 2 weeks ago? Because the other problem we have with inbound is when these forms come in, sometimes there's 3 different forms. They have to go to 3 different lines of business. So when you do an inbound capture center, soon as those are scanned, you separate that document, send a line of businesses. There's no trail now. So if I call in by one document, I'm the customer and say, well, what about the other 2 documents I sent in for the other lines of business? They're going to have no idea. So now what do? Oh, I better send those in again because they didn't get them the first time. So now I got more documents coming into the inbound that are duplicate, that may even contradict. Huge savings potential here on the inbound side.
And Warren, on your fully integrated model,
Mm-hmm.
what's Madison's perception of the adoption within the industry of that model there? How operational is that across the industry today?
Well, today, because we're talking infancy, very few are putting the inbound in there, but we're talking to the technology providers today. It's definitely in their scope of how they can incorporate that. But so your question is this platform here, how just rephrase percent of how operational is it, or how much has it been installed, or what's the?
How much of it is operational? How many companies are using it to that extent? Because I think that's a place that all of us want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But in each of our industries, in each of our companies, they're like, oh man, there's so many legacy issues that we deal with. If you're designing something from scratch, this is the model that we all strive for. But from an operational standpoint, how much of this is actually in companies today existing?
So if you look at kind of, I don't know if you have a comment on this before I do.
I don't think we have numbers for that yet. test case on, right? We just talked about this week. I think we'll have pretty good numbers probably in 3, 4, 5 months.
Yeah. Looking at CCM from just the outbound side, in the markets that we're talking about, having the full solution, I'm going to say it's less than 20% in the enterprises we talk about. I would say there's about 60 that's 20, add another 60, have pieces of it, but are still trying to figure out whether they need to add the pieces or they need to partner with somebody, because they've gotten to a point of where does that go. And I said, but there's still probably another 20% out there who have none of this in place. They're still, they don't have dashboards. They're still doing things traditionally, and they're now looking, they're kind of the late adopters. They're looking, okay, now I can step in. I will also tell you that 2 years ago, there was really only, when you look at, let me step back. When you look at the CCM software providers, growing rapidly. Just if you look at the version of CCM that are providing hosted managed services, there was originally, in the last 2 years, there's only 3 real players in that. That's up to about 7 or 8, with about 9 or 10 of them right behind who are coming behind to provide all these services and the software and these services provided. So there's a lot of change going on the technology side. Everybody has a little different bent on it, and that's one of the things that we're doing some research right now to kind of vet out to help. Everybody says they have a CCM software solution, but do they have what portion of it, and what does that look like? And that's where I was talking about. You get on the internet, it looks real good, but then it's like, well, we don't actually have an install yet. So, but it should work. I don't know that everybody wants to go down that path.
Well, to your question, one of the things that I've seen a couple customers of mine have is what they've done is the old stuff they haven't got to, but what they did is they put in some new systems for the go forward, and then they're slowly retrofitting the other ones. So anything new is following this, but the older ones are having it take just heavier lifting to get it all done.
Yeah, I would say there are some solutions now that if you've got some legacy stuff here that you just can't change, if you can at least get it through the pathway and track it and report on it, versus having a hybrid where, well, we only have half our applications on the CCM, the other half aren't even a part of it. Well, that gets difficult to manage. So there are some technologies and techniques to still allow, some legacy mainframe print to go through, even if you're not doing anything with the composition and changing it, at least get it through the channel and the pipe so that you're reporting on it, and then you know how to attack it, so you know how big your environment is. Any other questions?